Criminal defense attorney Robert Bianchi joins me now. So, Bob, you're a criminal defense attorney. You're also a former prosecutor. You are a former chief law enforcement officer. And in New Jersey, you went through the training that police officers get when it comes to firearm training. So based on all that experience that you have, is there anything you see in the details that we have that justifies this use of force?
Absolutely not. This is one of the most clear-cut cases where a manslaughter charge should be filed directly by the prosecutor as opposed to waiting for it to go before the grand jury, just like they would in any other manslaughter case. I mean, what really compels me is what I just heard right now about the idea that she's calling it to say a woman may be the victim of a scenario of a crime being occurred, a sex crime. She's in her pajamas. She's coming to the police car. I mean, she's not the perpetrator. So why this person would have used deadly force, which you can only use when you're confronting deadly force, and shooting across the other police officer is reckless in and of itself, and clearly a reckless act that warrants a manslaughter charge.
So that's what you would bring if you were the prosecutor. Put on your defense attorney hat for a moment here, though. Officer Noor, as we know, is not talking right now. Is that a smart move on his part?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people are opining about this. If you are the subject of a criminal investigation, we've talked about this before. Rule number one is that you exercise your right to remain silent. It is a criminal investigation. Later on down the road, should you as a defense lawyer feel that your police officer, after you have more information as a defense lawyer, could lend information that could exonerate your client, then you can speak to him. So those who are opining that the cops should be required to or forced to, you don't lose your constitutional rights as a police officer merely because you're a police officer. So that is standard practice not to speak at this point.
You know, Scott was talking about having been out there talking with members of the community, and when he was talking specifically with the one gentleman he just spoke to, that gentleman made the point that there's a bigger issue here when it comes to the community. We know how rocky the relationship has been in this city between the police and the community. What is the impact now of what we saw happen, or what we know happened on Saturday night, on that already difficult relationship?
I think the relationship is going to be much worse unless they do proactive community outreach, and it can't be done just in reaction to a scenario. But a lot of people who are minorities, and with all due respect, I do civil rights work as well, they're going to be sitting there saying, not that anything justifies what happened here, but you see, this is kind of what we're talking about. Now, I'm a police supporter. 99% of the time, or 95% of the time, the cops are doing the right thing. They're dealing with confrontational scenarios. Things get squirrely, as we say in the thing. There may be use of force, and there may be legitimate dangers. But there is no justification for this happening. So I think in the community, they're going to say, see, this is what we're talking about.
So you bring up an interesting point, because one of the things that's not being discussed this time around, in the last couple of years, we have talked about a lot of officer-involved shootings. Not all of them, but in many of those cases, race is brought up as a possible factor. It's not being discussed in that way in this case here. Why is that important?
Well, I think that race is brought up, and I'm not saying that race is not something that is important to consider in police work, but I have always said that the problems with regard to interactions with police officers in the community goes deeper than just that word. You have to communicate better. That's why community outreach is so important. You need to sit down with those groups, outreach. I did that as the prosecutor, and when we had a police-involved shooting of a minority, I would bring the community leaders into my office leaving the crime scene, or the scene of the shooting, if you will, and go down and say, listen, you know me, I know you. I'm going to dot I's and cross T's. If the cop did something wrong, they will be prosecuted. If they didn't, they will not. And I had already established that relationship with the community. And then when it was over, I would invite them to the press conferences. I would explain the investigation to them. I would explain what we found. And we never had a problem. But we had already pre-existing relationships with the community.
Speaks to the importance of a relationship and of communication that we talk about so much. Bob Bianchi, I appreciate it. Thanks for putting on all your hats
you got
for
it.
us today,
pleasure.
my friend.